here on Times Now. You're watching News Now Overnight, and I'm Rohit Srivastav. Ahead of the big talks in Pakistan, where the United States and Iran are set to negotiate in Pakistan over the temporary ceasefire that's in place, it looks like the United States President, Donald Trump, has threatened Iran once again. Taking to Truth Social, Donald Trump says that the Iranians are better at handling the fake news media and public relations than they are at fighting. President Donald Trump, in fact, also says that the Iranians don't seem to realize that they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate. This, in fact, is the latest statement that has come in from Donald Trump just ahead of the peace talks. And in fact, we have consulting editor Srinjoy Chaudhary joining us live on the broadcast to put this into perspective. So, Srinjoy, clearly, Hormuz is a big talking point, and that is something that is set to be discussed in the peace talks that are set to begin tomorrow.
Yes, the President of the United States, when he went to war against Iran, may not have realized that the Iranians had a weapon that was going to be very effective. And the Iranians have weaponized the Strait of Hormuz to the extent that these talks are happening today. Because if there is anything the President of the United States wants, it's a clear passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Sometimes he has said that even the payment of a cess is not a bad idea. Sometimes he has spoken against it. But nevertheless, because this weapon has been so effective, the weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz has been so effective that today the Iranians and the Americans are sitting in Islamabad, and they will tomorrow.
Right, absolutely. So it remains to be seen how these conversations pan out. But of course, in just a few hours from now, those conversations will begin in Islamabad, where Pakistan and the United States and Iran are set to discuss in Pakistan over a multitude of issues. Of course, Lebanon being the major sticking point between the two countries, and also Israel. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz, where we've been seeing a bit of a confused strategy coming in from the Americans as well, where Donald Trump himself had initially even spoke about him being okay with the toll, after which, of course, now this latest statement coming in from Donald Trump, where he's questioning the decision behind imposing a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. Let's move on and tell you more about the conversations that's set to take place tomorrow, because we're just hours away from what could be the beginning of the peace talks that could redefine world order and also determine regional as well as global stability, because in a few hours, the American delegation is expected to meet the Iranian delegation in Pakistan, where the truce talks are expected after nearly 40 days of war. But even before the talks begin, there is one question that Trump and his supporters will find quite difficult to answer. Who really won this war? Because when we tell you what the current situation is, it will certainly make you wonder whether the Americans got their strategy all wrong. Let's first take a look at who all are part of the delegation from both sides. First up is, of course, in the US delegation, we have the Vice President J.D. Vance, who is expected to be part of this delegation, along with Steve Witkoff, who is the Middle East Special Envoy, Jared Kushner, who is the senior advisor to the United States government. And then from Iran, we are expecting Mohammad Ghalibaf, who is the Iranian parliament speaker, and also Abbas Araghchi, who is the foreign minister and a person who has been a very vocal voice ever since the war started in Iran. So these are some of the figures who are expected to take part in the delegation level talks that are set to take place in Islamabad beginning tomorrow if everything goes well. In fact, here's also the current situation as far as the entire war is concerned. It's been over 40 days since the war has begun. And at the moment, this is what was the situation before and after the war began. Before, of course, the Strait of Hormuz was largely a free global passage and a major energy choke point. But now, Hormuz is a controlled transit point, and ships are expected to pay a toll to Iran. And this, of course, is what many are seeing as a strategic loss for the Americans. Then, of course, before the war had begun, the oil prices were relatively stable. But after the war had begun, now the oil prices are highly volatile. They still remain highly volatile, even though the temporary ceasefire is currently in place. Since the conversations are underway, and since we saw some attacks take place even after the ceasefire was announced, certainly the energy prices are still quite volatile. In fact, let's also listen in to what the US Vice President J.D. Vance had said just minutes before he took off to Pakistan.
We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see. As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
With that, we're getting in more breaking news. We were just speaking about Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who has now given a latest statement where he says the United States must uphold the ceasefire commitments on Lebanon. And Iran's Foreign Minister is saying that they must live to their commitments of the ceasefire, which included Lebanon. This is what the Iranian Foreign Minister says. He also says that these comments were made during a phone call with Iran's ambassador designate to Lebanon. So going back to Srinjoy on this, so Srinjoy, clearly the issue of Lebanon remains a major sticking point, because we also saw how the Pakistani Prime Minister in his initial tweet had mentioned Lebanon, after which the United States and Israel have both dismissed it, but now that seems to be the biggest sticking point between the United States and Iran.
Yes, it's a major fly in the ointment, because initially Lebanon was mentioned by the Pakistanis, and then the Americans and the Israelis said no, Lebanon was not part of the discussions. And we've seen the bombing of Lebanon by the Israelis. There have been a lot of casualties, probably 300 fatalities, which is why there are reports of the Lebanese leaders, including top leadership, going to Washington to discuss this issue with President Trump. Lebanon is the big issue, apart from the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, is the issue, with Iran successfully weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz. And that is something that the Americans will now have to deal with. It wasn't a problem till the war began. And then the Iranians realized what a weapon they had in with them. So that will certainly be on the agenda, as will Lebanon. And generally speaking, a clear ceasefire is what Iran is also hoping for. Now, nuclear issues will certainly come up. Iranian missiles could come up. Iran wants a guarantee. That is also an issue. So we'll have to see how this all pans out.
Right, absolutely. And Iran also wants their damages to be covered for. So a lot of demands coming in there from Iran. And of course, like you said, Strait of Hormuz has also been weaponized. And also they've been talking about the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which is also another major energy choke point. So whether or not that could also figure in the conversations, or could that also be used as a weapon to further put the pressure on the United States, is something that remains to be seen. But stay on with us, Srinjoy, because like you said, possibly the biggest talking point in the ceasefire so far is the Lebanon situation. While the United States and Israel maintain that Lebanon was never part of the ceasefire, Pakistan seems to have created some confusion, with Shehbaz Sharif's own post on X first mentioning Lebanon, which was then edited. Here's in fact the latest situation when we talk about Lebanon, because this is a proxy war that is taking place between Israel and Hezbollah. So that's what's exactly happening in Lebanon. The United States actually is not a very active player when it comes to the Lebanon strikes. So this is solely a matter between Israel and Lebanon. It has nothing to do with the Americans. Iran and Pakistan are also, of course, in the conversations. Now, this deal, of course, they claim includes Lebanon. Shehbaz Sharif had also mentioned it until, of course, the United States and Israel had to deny it. The United States and Israel, of course, are delinking Lebanon from Iran. They maintain that these are two separate issues and do not have anything to do with each other. Israel says that Hezbollah is still a threat. Remember, just about 24 hours earlier, they also claimed that the Hezbollah chief was eliminated in the recent airstrikes. So Israel making it clear that at the moment, Hezbollah is still a major threat, and they will continue to keep a very close watch, and attacks are still possible. Hezbollah, of course, is the strategic arm for Iran, which is why Iran cannot stay out of this. Iran is also fearing losing regional leverage, which is why Iran is keeping a very close watch of what's transpiring in Lebanon. And that's exactly why they also want Lebanon to be included in the ceasefire. But even before the talks could take place, it appears that Pakistan has now shot itself in the foot yet again, because Pakistan Minister Khwaja Asif has put out an anti-Israel rant on his social media platform X. This, in fact, is the post that I have behind me. This post has now been deleted, but basically, in his post, he called Israel an evil force and a curse for humanity while peace talks are underway in Islamabad. Genocide is being committed in Lebanon. Innocent citizens are being killed by Israel, first Gaza, then Iran, and now Lebanon. Bloodletting continues unabated. I hope and pray people who created this cancerous state on Palestinian land to get rid of European Jews burn in hell. This post, of course, was subsequently deleted because this also, remember, is coming just ahead of the peace talks that are set to take place in just a few hours from now in Islamabad. Then, of course, you also had the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who had responded to this. In fact, this is the post that the Prime Minister of Israel put out from his official social media platform, where he says, the Prime Minister's office, Pakistan Defense Minister's call for Israel's annihilation is outrageous, and this is not a statement that can be tolerated from any government, especially not from one that claims to be a neutral arbiter for peace. So clearly the role of Pakistan also being questioned here by Israel ever since this post was put out. Now, of course, coming under pressure and facing a lot of flack, the Pakistani minister had to delete his tweet, but of course, not before questions were raised by the Israeli Prime Minister himself. Meanwhile, preparations are also underway in Islamabad, and it is currently Islamabad that is locked down. Let's first listen in to what the people of Islamabad have to say.
Pakistani nation and our government is very hopeful for the peace talks that are going to held in Islamabad, and we are hopeful that these peace talks will come to an end as a result of peace. They will bring peace in the region, and as you all know that Pakistan is playing a key role of mediator to bring down the you can say the flames of war to cool them and to bring peace in the region.
So has Pakistan's mediation effort failed even before it started? Because after creating confusion over Lebanon, has Pakistan only made the situation worse? And could the entire world pay the price for Pakistan's blunder as a mediator? That's the big question, because what we are seeing over the last 24 hours at least, the kind of comments that have come in from the Pakistani minister, and then, of course, the response that is coming from the Israeli Prime Minister, going on to show, in fact, raising questions about whether Pakistan can even be a neutral arbiter, considering Israel is a key player in this argument, in this entire conversation that's currently underway between the United States and Iran. But Pakistan, of course, and their minister going on to call for annihilation of Israel. Meanwhile, a Chinese government spokesperson also said that they call on relevant parties to resolve the disputes through political and diplomatic means. So China also keeping a very close watch. Of course, Donald Trump also had mentioned China in one of his social media posts when speaking about the ceasefire. China wants a calm and restrained talks to take place, and also wants both sides to work together to de-escalate the situation.
平和安排应当有利于平息地区的战火，恢复和平稳定。我们呼吁有关方面通过政治外交途径化解争端，保持冷静克制，推动局势降温。
Let's move on and now shift focus to a man who was